Welcome back to the Archive Network. Aurelius here with Malik, curators of the Conflict Archive. We left Peloponnesian War last time with each passing season, hope for peace dwindled. Today, we pick up where we left off. As the Peloponnesian War dragged on into its second and third years, we saw violence escalate relentlessly. The early hopes for a swift resolution faded like the morning mist. What began as a contest of strength morphed into a brutal struggle for survival. This war was no longer about honor. It became a desperate fight for mere existence. We watched as the conflict consumed everything in its path, leaving devastation and despair in its wake, a stark reminder of the cost of ambition.
That struggle went beyond just survival. It was a fight against despair that gripped the heart of every resident. Take Potidæa, for instance. It was once a thriving city, filled with laughter and life. But during the siege, it became a haunting shadow of itself. Families huddled together, watching their loved ones starve, surrendering not just to the might of Athens, but to the overwhelming weight of their own hopelessness. Each day felt like a battle, not just against the enemy outside, but against the darkness creeping inside.
The fate of Potidæa serves as a grim warning for us all. When the gates swung open, the Athenian generals showed no mercy whatsoever. They executed the rebel leaders without a second thought, making it abundantly clear that dissent would not be tolerated. We see this time and again in history. Empires act decisively to crush rebellion, silencing any whispers of discontent. It's a brutal reality, but one we must acknowledge if we're to understand the true nature of power.
But you're oversimplifying the consequences, Aurelius. The real cost was human. Think about the families torn apart, the heartbreak they faced. Children left without protection, wandering alone in a world that turned its back on them. And those women and children sold into slavery. They weren't just collateral damage. They were real people with dreams and lives, all victims of political decisions made in distant halls. Their suffering isn't just a footnote in history. It deserves to be acknowledged and remembered.
You're not wrong about the human cost. But let's look at the larger picture. Athens was fighting for its very survival, too. Thousands of refugees were flooding into the city, and the social fabric was beginning to fray under that strain. The air thickened with fear and disease. People were desperate, and that desperation led to a breakdown of order. We can't ignore this chaos. It was a crucial element in the rise and fall of empires, shaping the very course of history.
That breakdown was catastrophic. The plague that swept through Athens wasn't just an enemy. It was a reflection of the city's desperation. Thucydides captured that horror so vividly. Corpses lay unattended in the streets, while families were forced to abandon their dead. It wasn't just a physical disease. It exposed a profound moral failure. Neighbors turned on each other, and trust evaporated. Athens was crumbling from within, and the human cost was staggering. It's hard to comprehend the depth of that despair.
Yes, the plague was a devastating blow. We watched as Pericles, the guiding star of Athens, fell victim to the fever. With his death, the city lost its compass. This wasn't just a loss of a leader. It was a moment that plunged Athens into a deep uncertainty. Leadership faltered when it was needed most. The council was left scrambling, and the citizens looked around, bewildered. In such times, we see how quickly empires can stumble.
Aurelius, this isn't just about leadership. It's about the collapse of ideals that were once the backbone of our society. The land war raged on. Spartan armies marched into Attica, and with them came destruction. Whole villages lay in ruins, and the countryside turned into a wasteland. Rural Athenians faced daily terror, with no refuge or certainty. They clung to the fragile hope that somehow, against all odds, they'd survive to see another year. What does that say about us?
True, but Athens refused to be cowed. The power of her navy became a crucial factor in this struggle. Triremes sliced through the wine-dark sea, launching swift strikes against Peloponnesian coasts. With every victory, they became a symbol of Athenian resilience. When faced with despair, we didn't just cower. We fought back. This is how a city-state can transform its vulnerability into strength, reminding us all that sometimes it's the will to resist that shapes history.
But even victories came at a heavy cost. At Pylos, a small group of Spartan hoplites found themselves cut off from their allies. When they finally surrendered, it shocked the Greek world. These captives marched through the streets of Athens, their defeat becoming a bitter symbol of loss. Instead of ushering in peace, this moment only deepened the cycle of retribution and hatred. People began to see each other, not just as enemies, but as reminders of their own suffering and loss.
Exactly. Each victory was overshadowed by the brutality that followed. In Corcyra, civil war erupted, tearing families and communities apart. Neighbors turned against neighbors, and the ideals of reason and civic order collapsed under the weight of vengeance. We saw lives shattered, friendships destroyed. People who once stood shoulder to shoulder suddenly found themselves on opposite sides, driven by fear, anger, and a thirst for retribution. It's a grim reminder of how quickly order can dissolve into chaos.
The ideals you speak of were nothing more than illusions. In the chaos of the time, Athens' ambition turned ruthless. The demand for submission from Melos was a brutal reminder of how far they'd go to silence dissent. The siege of Melos left a haunting silence that echoed the true cost of pride and power. Lives were shattered, families torn apart. Humanity was lost amid the ambitions, forgotten in the pursuit of dominance. It's a tragedy that still resonates today.
With each passing season, our hope for peace dwindled like the last rays of sunlight at dusk. The relentless machinery of war ground on, fueled by fear and pride, leaving little room for mercy. The old citizen armies, once the backbone of our defense, gave way to mercenaries driven by gold rather than loyalty, and trust eroded like the crumbling walls of ancient cities. The stakes were higher than ever, with the very fate of Greece hanging precariously in the balance, and the whispers of history warned us of what was to come.
That's where we leave it this time. Peloponnesian War continues. The story isn't finished yet. Find the full series on the Conflict Archive, part of the Archive Network. We'll be back with the next chapter.